Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is written by yours truly, and of course exclusive to the DMTForestOfFEAR channel. I'm going to bring back a listener favourite feature to the channel, where you guys get to decide the fate of the characters and story. Of course, as ever though, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. Well, it really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled The 10 Tests of the Wolf. Chapter 1, The Dark Entry Forest, Connecticut. Let's get straight into that. I guess life is like a box of chocolates. If the chocolates were body parts of your best friends, that is. If you had said to me 3 years ago that I would be what I am now, that my life as I knew it would no longer exist, and everyone I had ever known a distant memory, I would have laughed my ass off. You see, growing up in the sleepy English countryside, not much of anything ever happening around our little village. I guess we kind of expected our entire lives to be the same. Of course, one could never know what God has planned, but nothing ever happens, right? Wrong. Life has a habit of dropping a weight on your shoulders when you least expect it, when it's the worst timing. You never really can plan for what's ahead, only prepare. I suppose in my circumstance, it's a little skewed. What if I told you, dear reader, that on one dark, rainy, windy night in sweet USA, I embarked on a path that was never written for me, at least if you count my previous sentiment, and that one night would change how I viewed everything and everyone around me, and how I would be thrown headfirst into a world only mentioned in horror books and movies. A world that really does exist. Just few have the chance, or perhaps lack the sense to even care for such matters anymore, to write or report the world as we know it. The dark underbelly of every country's forgotten lore, myths, legends, and more. Now, have you ever questioned why so many go missing out in the vast wilds of the world? Predation, yes. Accidents, of course. But what about the suspicious number who seemingly vanish, sometimes with company completely silent and in a blink of an eye? Only the dense "oh" being their last known words or sound. An ambush attack? Very likely. What about the vanishing homeless population around much of the world's cities? Where do they really end up, and who disposes of so many? I'll give you a slight hint. When you see the kind charity support workers taking names and other such details, gathering the homeless in one area and promising hot food and eventually a warm bed, just know that a bed, it ain't warm. In fact, it ain't a bed at all, but a one-way ticket to some monster's dinner bowl. The fact is, underlying in every city and national forest are societies of different breeds, species, whatever. And sometimes under the guise of normal everyday companies and jobs is a bustling business in flesh or souls or bones and whatever else they pick from your remains. Out in the national forest, well, that's a little different. It's more cultures or clans, if you like. More ancient too. You don't want to be walking off trail. I mean it. What waits for such opportunities is worse than any human mind can conceive. Well, it's not worth it, so stay on the trail, folks. What I am trying to get across is that under the very fabric of society, as you know it, lies an unwelcome and perilous world, run by big business and crooked government officials. Well, I guess the last horror you already know. But where do I fit into all of this nightmare? Well, my name is Warren, I'm 28, and it's not often that I would get the chance to travel. I was in my late 20s and broke as fuck. And now, my best friend's Wes, 28, and his brother Gary, 25, on the other hand, had sold their IT startup company and were making a killing and offered to take me along with them as they toured the Midwest. After touring the Midwest, we'd head then back over to the East Coast, camping at all the different forests. I obviously looked at my night shift high-vis vest that I wore when working on the docks, the crudely drawn penis adorning the team leader writing on the back, and knowing that I would have overtime the following night. It was a no-brainer. And to solidify the moment, my cell phone notification dinged, and it was a message from that greasy weasel at the employment agency who employed me. confirming my fears that it was in fact overtime tomorrow. When Wes and Gary asked if I would come along, I replied, "There's an Englishman shit in the woods," and we all bust up laughing and joking. That night we sat around my fire, drinking beers and planning where and what we would do. Now, Wes and Gary were avid outdoorsmen, and I just assumed that they were prepared and able to undertake such an epic journey in some of the most wild parts of the world, and that I would just slow them down a little. The air was chilly that evening, and I remember as I sat there, eyes heavy from the booze, good company snoring their asses off, I gazed into the fire spark sailing up into the dark night sky, wisping around and moving without purpose or direction, much like a leaf in the wind. And soon my breathing began getting heavier as I slowly drifted off to sleep. Now, let's save you the long-ass journey deets and all the jet lag. In fact, I'm going to fast forward to 2 months later, and the day we were approaching our last stop before flying to Hawaii. Or at least that was the plan. We arrived on a beautiful sunny morning at Dark Entry Forest, Connecticut. Now I know what you're thinking. What? What are you doing there? But you gotta remember, we weren't from these boonies. I'm sorry, it's infectious. Now, why had Wes come to the conclusion that this was a great stop for us would-be amateurs? I have no idea. What I do know is, as soon as we came to the outskirts of the forest area, and land surrounding it, with 3 huge mountains dominating the landscape ahead, I knew it was already out of our league. The trees, so old and twisted, thick, overhanging arms covered the rustic road as we drove further and further from any sign of civilization. The last gas station we saw was at least 3 hours behind us. It was so dark that the sky was barely visible above, and the deeper we got, twigs and limbs clapped against the paintwork and glass of our ride. There were no houses lining the roads as we drew closer and closer into the mouth of the beast. To think now that I drink from its malevolence as if it were a breast. It was clear to me from very early on that Gary wasn't feeling the vibe on this one either. I noticed that he had grown quiet and hardly responded to a word anyone said. And as we grew nearer to the actual national forest, Wes slowed a little and said, "We're going to pull over in a little while. We can't be spotted or they kick our ass out. I've done some research and it's forbidden to enter the forest without proper documentation or a pass. So we're going to pull over in about another mile, hide the truck under some bushes and beat a trail through until we find a nice spot for a couple of nights. Sound good, boys?" He finished eyeing me in the rearview mirror, his right eyebrow raised comically. I just smirked and nodded. Yeah, sounds good, bruv." And Gary just nodded too and began rolling a joint. As the tree's oppression seemed to reach a ridiculous amount of anxiety from within at least 2 of us, Wes pulled sharply onto the side of the road, which had become a dirt road. And when I say pulled off, I should actually say drove haphazardly off and through branches and brush, bounding over fallen trees long since rotted and green with lichen, until finally, a couple of minutes later, we stopped. "We're here," Wes said as he clapped his hands together, rubbing his palms together vigorously. Myself and Gary both still holding an oh shit handle above our heads, and breathing a little rattled. Before either of us could say a word, the ding, ding, ding seatbelt warning signal sounded, and Wes stepped out of the truck. Broken from our daze, Gary and I hopped out as well, grabbing the gear and readying ourselves. "You ready, boys? This is going to be incredible. This forest has a crazy past, and there's supposed to be an abandoned town somewhere in the center. It was founded in early 1740 by the Dudleys, and they set up a small town which brought others. By the 1800s, however, it was completely abandoned and have remained like that until around 1920. We want to check out if we find it," he finished. Finally. I looked around and then to Gary. Gary stood slack-jawed before shaking his head with his 2 palms flat out in a motion like, "Really?" or "Come on." Wes nodded aloud and looked at me. I think he expected me to mirror his snodding or something, but I wore the same expression as Gary. "Have you even looked around in the last 4 hours?" expression. Now Wes grabbed his pack and shook his head saying, "You pair of pussies," before walking off to our right and onto a small game trail. I turned and looked at Gary, who met my eyes. Well, he's your brother." I laughed and we both grabbed our gear and quickly followed Wes into the dark trees and brush. For hours and hours we trekked until what may have been approaching 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We stopped for a bite and a drink. All morning and afternoon we'd heard nor seen a thing. The place, it seemed dead. Also, the further in we got, the more the canopy of trees above us and around us blotted out the sunlight that desperately attempted to filter through. Wes sat on a downed tree and began eating his sandwich whilst looking at his topo map. Gary rolled another joint and eyed our surroundings anxiously, particularly at backside. "Everything okay, bruv?" I asked him, breaking him away from his daze. "Huh? Oh yeah, just a little jumpy is all. Can't shake this feeling like we shouldn't be here," he replied whilst licking the Rizzler and rolling it up into a baseball bat cone. "Yeah, it's got me pretty spooked too, bro. I don't think I'm going to sleep a wink tonight," I added, forcing a laugh. Quit your moaning, you pair of babies. It's dark and old. I'll be more concerned about the snakes than anything else," Wes chimed in, slapping his knee and spitting breadcrumbs and ham everywhere. "Look," he added, "according to this topo map, the old abandoned town is some miles northeast of here, and to the south is a waterfall and caves. Then to our west is an old power plant or some government buildings. I can't tell, but it looks pretty fortified, so probably want to steer clear of there if we can. I did find a Reddit post from 5 years ago that says it's an old testing facility or gov research lab. Maybe we can try to swing by there or the caves before we head out in a couple of days. We can get some great pics for the gram." Wes questioned as he opened a beer and guzzled it down. Could we just find a damn place to chillax and rest for the night? It's already 3:30 in the afternoon. It's already like dusk in this damn forest. I reckon we have a couple of hours of light left before we can't even see a hand in front of our faces," added Gary, kind of pissed off, but I guess I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, I guess you're right. Let's move out when you're ready," replied Wes with a sigh. "There's a river running about another 20 minutes north of here. Should be a great spot to pitch our tent and maybe have a swim," he added, pointing out the small clearing we found ourselves in. "Okay, sounds good to me," I said as I got up and readied my pack. Soon we'd found the spot Wes was aiming us towards and set about getting the area clear of debris and any hiding snakes nearby. I was tasked with gathering firewood and some twigs. Gary set about clearing debris from the camp, and Wes was looking over his topo map again and mumbling away to himself. I shook my head as I left the camp and made my way deeper into the forest. Around 10 minutes later, I had gathered enough large bits of wood and some smaller twigs and was heading back to the camp when, snap, from my left there came a large break of a limb, but the damn forest was so dark and thick that I couldn't make out much of anything. Whatever made that noise had to be big. I mean, it wasn't the break of a twig. No, it was something large stepping on a small branch. I noticed very quickly how quiet the forest had become, even more so than it had been all that day. As I turned slowly to back up out there and back to camp, I thought something caught my eye, for just a slither of a second. Something dark and large looming out from behind a tree. But on my second glance, it was gone. I turned and backed away back down the trail I had followed in, and as I was maybe 100 meters from the camp, still backing up with my back facing camp, I suddenly tripped and fell backwards and landed on my ass. And what lay before me, with my legs and feet laying over it, was a white-tailed deer. A deer that wasn't there when I'd passed minutes before. A very destroyed white-tailed deer, and with its bottom half completely missing. Long, thick slices ran the entire length of the carcass, seemingly covering every inch of its cadaver. I remember the look it had transfixed on its face, a look of pure anguish in the last throes of life. Its large white eyeballs popped from their sockets, hanging loosely and dripping blood and other bodily fluids. And the creepiest factor, though, was that the deer's head had been twisted violently around to face backwards, its skull cracked open like a boiled egg, brain matter apparently missing or scattered over the white bone protruding out here and there. In reflection, I had never seen anything like that in my life. I had seen the odd sheep mauling by wild dogs, but That was a more scattered affair. This was one solid chunk of remains, torn in two and with its brain smashed out and head twisted in a gruesome second of violence. Whatever had attacked the deer did so in a vicious and ferocious manner. And then it dawned on me. This was a message. This disgusting kill hadn't been here when I came through but 25 minutes before. Someone or something had to have placed it, knowing that I would be walking back to camp this way. An icy chilling realization washed over me in seconds. Where was it now? I scrambled back on hands and feet from the pile of gore and got to my feet, glancing left, then right, and now on the verge of hyperventilating. I walked back once more, slowly and calculated, as I scanned the area around me for any signs of life. 10 steps later, my head and shoulders banged off something wet and warm. I squealed like a girl and whirled around into the dripping remains of 3 dead rabbits, their bodies still steaming and entrails hanging loosely out of the guts. Each one hung from a string of sorts. I couldn't tell, but it looked to be a woven grass or possibly reeds. Anyways, as I said, I couldn't or wouldn't hang around to have a closer look. This time, I turned my back from the sight and ran for camp a few minutes away. And just as my legs powered me forward, I heard a growl. A solid, deathly growl that followed me as I ran. Something also ran and was tailing me to my right side. Every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of dark hair and impossibly long arms. A shaggy mane-like shoulder and chest, with what I assumed at the time was a large Kangal hunting dog. Terrified and confused, I didn't stop until I ran right into camp, collapsing to my knees and gasping for air. Gary had a makeshift broom and was sweeping the ground around camp. Wes was heating a hot pot coffee on the gas stove that we had for emergencies and laughed his ass off when I fell to the floor, gasping for air. The armful of wooden twigs clattering on top of me and surrounding my panting body. Well, look who got scared out of the big bad woods. Wes burst up laughing so hard he nearly fell from the seat of the downed tree trunk. I still lay half gasping and half trying to get my words out. We gotta go, I finally managed to say, glancing at each of them wildly. Go? Fuck no, Wes barked, still chuckling like an arsehole. I'm serious, Wes. Something really fucked up is going on out there. Take a walk 2 minutes that way and see for yourself, I countered angrily. Why in the world would we do that, huh? He asked, now looking a bit pissed off with me. This is the last stop, remember? We came all this way north, trekked all the way out here, not to mention all the hours I did researching this place. I ain't leaving, he spat, shaking his head vigorously. And still, the forest around us seemed devoid of life. Only the leaves rustling in the cool evening breeze accompanied our argument. Then, almost simultaneously, myself and Wes turned to look at Gary. Gary still stood facing the trees I had burst through and wore a look of pure deranged terror on his face. His blood drained from his complexion and mouth agape. Gazza, you good, bro? Asked Wes, a little unnerved. Yeah, Gaz, you okay? Did you see something? I asked as I got back to my feet and held onto a long, heavy piece of timber. And just then, a mighty crashing of branches and brush came bursting from my left flank and away deeper into the forest. It sounded like a monster truck was crushing the trees as it crashed into them. Whatever made it had left the area, but wanted us to know that it was there. Now, very pale and shaken, Gary turned and faced Wes and I saw a big dog, he blurted out. A dog? Fuck me, are you two gonna shit yourselves all night? We've seen a ton of wolves and bears. Hell, even a damn mountain lion on this trip. Now you're both scared by a dog. Wes laughed once again. Myself and Gary looked at each other for confirmation. I saw something too, but I don't think it was a dog. More likely a wolf, but fucked up. I don't know, as it was just a glimpse here and there, but I think it was running after me on 2 feet. You know, bipedal, like... I trailed off, lost in a dark realization. Like a werewolf? Gary finally cut in, nodding his head with a wild look on his face. Puh! Spat Wes, slapping his knee and getting up. Yeah, right. Did you two plan this on the way out here? Is this some kind of game or something? How much you got on me believing you and Balin? What's it up to? $20, $50, Wes added, pointing to his younger brother. But Gary just remained stunned and silent as the forest around us. All right, I'll go and check out this thing you mentioned. I'll be back in 5 minutes, he added before going to walk into the dark trees around camp from which I had returned. A stark realization washed over me, and I reached out and grabbed his arm. Wait, I said, letting go of his arm as he turned to me. What? He asked, a little frustrated. You can't. It's too dangerous. Whatever is here left us a message using dead animals. I've never seen anything like this before. There's a deer completely torn in two, its brain smashed out, and 3 rabbits hanging from some creepy-ass rope. It's some real-life Blair Witch type shit, I shouted, more out of my frayed nerves than anger. Yeah, right. I'm just going to take a look-see and I'll be right back. Okay, ladies? Wes cockily added before trying to leave once more, but Gary was having none of it and suddenly ran in front of Wes and grabbed his brother by the shoulders. You ain't walking off into that forest in this darkness, completely unarmed, bro. We need to stay together, and now it's so late that we have to spend the night here anyway. We won't make it back to the truck if we leave now. I don't know what I just saw, but it was big and looked like something from Michael Lockhart's imagination. Please, bro, just sit down and stay alert. We're in for a long night, Gary said, looking his brother in the eyes and nodding intently. Wes eyed us both suspiciously and then sighed. Okay, ladies, I'll keep you safe from a werewolf. It's what I do, after all. He laughed and sat back down to pour some coffee. Myself and Gary again glanced into each other and then back to the forest around us. Unsure of really what to do, I set about lighting a big fire as soon as possible. If anything was lurking close by, we would hopefully see it before it got the drop on us. Plus, the fire would keep away any creepy crawlies and snakes. At that moment, I finally sat my ass down and tried to calm my thoughts and breathe them. For the rest of the night, myself and Gary remained vigilant and couldn't shake the feeling of being watched or rather hunted. Wes, on the other hand, believed none of it and insisted on cracking an expensive bottle of scotch that he'd saved for our last night under the stars. And after a few glasses of the good stuff, I was feeling a little better and swayed merrily on my makeshift seat. Gary also was a little worse for wear, and soon it was approaching 2 a.m. Yawning and stretching like a ballerina, I got up. Well, I'm beat. I'm going to head to sleep and I'll see you tards in the morning, I said as I stumbled my way over to my tent, unzipping it loudly and falling into the opening rather than stepping. Wes and Gary were sniggering behind me, and it made me smile as I gave up trying to take my jeans off and just lay half in and half out of my sleeping bag. Before I knew it, I was in a deep sleep. My last memory of that night was seeing a drunk Wes and Gary embracing in a hug before each of them going to their respective tents. Hours later, I was awoken by a shrill scream. I sprung up dazed from the booze still, and my heart pounded in my chest. Scrambling out of the tent, I turned to look to see Wes distraught and pacing back and forth. No, 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 he repeated over and over again. What's going on? I asked with panic brewing inside my chest, a cold feeling of dread seeping into my bones. I knew what he was going to say before he even said it. He's gone, Wes answered quietly and trembling as he pointed to Gary's tent, the front of which was torn open and with a large gash in the side of it, and what appeared to be blood running lazily down the outside edge. And there was lots of it too. Whatever had attacked Gary did so quickly and with brutal consequence. He had evidently lost a lot of blood and now was somewhere out there, in amongst the darkness and gloom. Only Wes's sniffles and pacing footfall and drops of morning dew accompanied us. As I looked to Wes, dumbfounded and beginning to cry, terrible pain scream shattered the early morning's ambience. It was the scream of a human, a last throe of anguish and pain few have the displeasure of feeling. The scream echoed off and around us, bouncing off the trees that circled our camp, making it hard to get an idea of its location. Gary! Wes screamed into the darkness until his voice broke and he was out of breath. As Wes paced the camp, I took a look inside Gary's tent, and what lay inside was a scene from a true crime documentary. Blood painted the inside walls and Gary's bedding. I was shredded. I fell backward, scrambling on my hands and feet in shock. "Fuck!" I screamed. "It's coming from that way, due west," Wes said as he gathered his belongings and slung them into his backpack. "We can't," I suggested, but was cut off by Wes angrily. "We're going, and that's fucking final." I nodded, not knowing what else to do. "Okay, just let me get ready," I added before scrambling around like a headless chicken. A couple of minutes later, and we were set. We'd heard a number of screams coming from the west, and that had to be a sign that he was still alive. At least that's what Wes thought, and I was damned if I would lose 2 friends that night. And without a second thought, we left camp and headed deeper into the forest, following the screams and growls. To say that I was scared shitless, I would be an understatement. I was freezing cold and with adrenaline pumping through my system. I couldn't feel my face and hands. My ears rang with a high-pitched ring, and everything around us was darkness and shadow. Most of all, we were unarmed, except for an emergency flare kit with 3 flares. As we stumbled our way deeper into this belly of the beast, it suddenly dawned on me that we were headed towards another campsite. Through the thick vegetation, I could make out a small campfire, and with a large lean-to. We couldn't hear nothing but the crunching of our own boots. "You see that, Wes?" I asked quietly, pointing towards the dim glow off to our front right. "Yeah, must be another group or maybe even a game warden," Wes suggested curiously. "Be on guard. You never know what we could run into out here," he added. As we slowly approached the crackling of the fire, was all that could be heard. Clearly, it was empty. Like our campsite, there was a clear sign of an attack taking place. Blood and tissue lay strewn about the camp. 2 beds and 1 destroyed. Our only guess was that they, the surviving member of camp, had indeed followed after whomever had been taken. That's if they were, in fact, still alive. A small bonus for this chilling find was an assortment of rifles and a couple of handguns, a 45 Webley and a couple of AR-15s with what I guess to be extended magazines. "We just hit the jackpot, Warren," Wes whispered excitedly. "What? Well, I guess so, but won't whoever owns all this want it themselves when they..." I then tried off how stupid the suggestion was after being surrounded by odds and ends of somebody's anatomy. "Right. Yeah, I see what you mean, Wes," I commented in a daze, trying to get my head in gear with what was transpiring around us. "Let's grab what we can and shove whatever into that duffel bag," Wes suggested as he glanced around and began loading extra rounds and other supplies. And as we were just about done collecting a small arsenal of medical supplies, from off to our northwest, a volley of automatic gunshots rang out across the valley and echoed all around us. It was the last we would hear from that night, almost like that was their last fight at survival, at living before this animal collected its pound of flesh. "We need to move," Wes declared as he rushed off through the track of destruction into the forest surrounding the camp. A clear path had been broken through much of the smaller trees and bushes. Every now and then I would see a drop of blood or a small pool of blood dashed over the leaves and branches. And on we clambered and jogged our way through that foreboding forest. Not another sound was heard, and the realization that Gary wasn't alive had set in. After 3 hours of frantic searching, we slowed our pace and decided to take a rest stop. As we caught our breath and Wes was reviewing his map, a soft, slow creak could be heard. It was quiet and almost rocked with the wind to and fro. I got up from where I sat and, slowly following the noise, I cautiously made my way around the thick oak tree and brush. There, hanging lifelessly and swaying in the early morning's breeze, was Gary's corpse. His body was evidently broken at odd angles, and his blood ran slowly dripping from his remaining foot. The other was torn at the knee. Around his throat was that same creepy Blair Witch rope lashed around a huge branch some 30 feet above him. His mouth frozen in a deathly grimace, his skin blue and purple, his eyeballs blown from their sockets and dangling grotesquely on his cheekbones. My breath caught in my throat and I fell backwards, beginning to vomit, as suddenly Wes came walking around the other side of the trees. His mouth full in a gape and anguished look of hopelessness and sorrow donned his face. and he let out a painful "No!" rushing forward and collapsing to the ground at Gary's feet. "No! Why?" He bawled uncontrollably as I got up and tried to console him, dragging him away from the gruesome sight of his eviscerated younger brother. He sobbed like a child in my arms as I looked back up at Gary's swaying corpse, shocked to my very core that something like this could happen. Then, very suddenly, we were blindsided from our rear left, and I was sent flying into the brush and thorns. My vision darkened as I was losing consciousness off and on. Each time I gained consciousness, the pain-shrill screams of Wes shattered the gloom of my concussion, and as blood ran into my eyes, there, not 5 steps away from me, was a hulking creature, as black as the night itself, tearing into Wes and removing limb after limb as my friend drowned in his own blood. Its carnivorous growls and sadistic eyes would haunt my sleep for the rest of my days, and then it was finished. As Wes's still warm body twitched and convulsed erratically in his last throes of life and death, its menacing attention fixated on me. I was laying half in and gathering of ferns and other such brush as my body and mind froze up. For a moment there, as this hulking beast slowly lurched towards me, an overwhelmingly peaceful acceptance washed over me. Yes, I was terrified. I thought this to be my last moments alive, but there was a greater force at play too. Maybe a divine being decided to take my fear and replace it with acceptance. I don't know, but in that moment, I was ready. Ready for whatever came next. However, what did come next was far stranger than anyone could have predicted. The blood-stained monster looked closer, its red eyes fixated with mine, emitting a carnivorous growl. And it launched its attack. I screamed aloud as the werewolf began tearing into my chest and slicing through my clothes. I tried to fight it off, punching and kicking, but it was so heavy and powerful, and before long it grabbed a hold of my right arm and lunged down, sinking its maw into my throat and shoulder, its fetid hot breath bellowing all over my face. I tore at its thick mane and scratched at its face, but nothing would stop this animal from its intent. It came for blood and flesh, and I was the pudding to the 3-course meal. And as my vision swam in and out of a blur, the edges of my vision getting darker and darker like a tunnel of shadow, slowly swallowing me whole, there came a soft buzzing noise, and I thought I saw a small drone hovering over the treetops. Then a quick swooshing sound, followed by 3 more. The beast let go of me and reared its titanic head high above into the morning sky, roaring a thunderous howl, before then tumbling and stumbling to its right haphazardly and darting through the trees and bush out of sight. And as it left, I saw that 3 administrative tranquilizer darts were jammed into its back and shoulders. Someone else was here and had quite possibly saved my life. But the fact still remained as the crashing of the foul beast leaving the area got quieter and quieter, that I was bleeding out and very likely about to die. And just before my consciousness gave in to death or sleep, a number of men wearing Spec Ops tactical outfits came rushing into the small clearing, and one felt for my pulse while another began applying a pressure and clot kit on my torn throat. And then, as their words became deep and robotic, I slipped into a deep sleep. I awoke to the bouncing and rocking sensation of being in a vehicle, and opening my eyes I could make out that I was in a flatbed truck headed somewhere still in the forest. It was still dark outside, so not much time had passed since the attack, the bluish haze of dawn's light beginning to climb the horizon. I was on the stretcher, I had an IV drip, and 2 guys sat behind me in the cab of the truck, whilst another one sat monitoring the rear of the vehicle. I at the time assumed they were taking me to the nearest hospital emergency room, but then I keyed in to their conversation, and a dark, foreboding realization set in. "Ha! Can't believe that idiot still come out this way, Dan. Ain't they heard the stories, or don't they feel how fucking evil this forest is? That's damn crazy that this one and his friends even lasted a day out here." The man, who I recall was named Kenny, said with a chuckle. "Yeah, Kenny. I told you before and I'll tell you again. You just can't teach stupid. Shit. When I first started at the compound, I couldn't sleep for a whole month. In fact, come to think of it, I still can't. But that's only 'cause Miss Mary be FaceTiming me every damn night, saying she's missing her sugar. Dan squawked with a classic Mudley the Dog style laugh. Ah, come on now, Dan. We know that was your sister, you sick fuck, chimed in the other man sat in front of me. Ah, Jesse, you can kiss my ass, son. She only calls on a Sunday. Dan fired back as the men fell about laughing aloud, and the truck bumped and bounced its way slowly down the old logging road. You know, once Alpha Team catch that son of a bitch, they're gonna roll out a whole super soldier program. Jack down in the biolab said that the general gave a thumbs up for testing or some shit. Ah, it's top secret, of course, but that nerd loves his liquor and gets loose lips. He said they already have conducted a testing phase and the results were fucking insane. He reckons they got 3 of these new improved super soldier hybrids, and they're trying to do the same with the damn face eaters, Kenny said nonchalantly, as if it were an everyday thing for these men. Well, if there's one thing I learned over the last 25 years at the compound, it's keep what you see or hear to yourself, unless you want to be enrolled in a damn catering program. You watch that mouth of yours, son, or you'll be dinner for their experiments. Dan retorted harshly at the younger man, who in turn nodded his head. What the fuck? I mouthed to myself and quickly closed my eyes as Jesse turned to look at me again. In what seemed like 10 minutes, maybe more, the truck suddenly was launched sideways and off the road and into the forest in a shallow ditch. Something had blindsided the vehicle from the left side and tipped us off the road. As the truck spun upside down, over and over rolling, the world seemed to pause as medical equipment and supplies tumbled around me like a spin cycle washing machine. And Jesse very suddenly was ripped right out of the back. The crashing of metal and revving engine accompanied us until I was thrown from the truck and out into a tall grouping of long grass and ferns, where I landed with a thud. Pain and exhaustion racked my body and mind, and from where I lay battered and torn, I could see the truck's large wheels spinning in the air. I could hear the engine roaring, and then the screaming started. A short burst of automatic gunshots rang out, and they were silenced within seconds. The whimpering pleas of Kenny was all that remained, until his shrill, gargled begging was vanquished in seconds. The beast was back. I had ripped Kenny's head and spine out in one sick motion. An act of pure rage and madness. This was all too much for me to take. My left arm appeared to be broken. Collapsing my head back to the cold earth, I gave in to my injuries and exhaustion. I wanted no more of this nightmare, and I knew I could not escape, even if I wanted to. When I finally came to, I realized that I was no longer outside and wasn't arse over tit in a bush. No, I was tucked up warm as I could be, in a large bed. Sunlight rays stretched in through the window and across the room to the foot of the bed. A large wild boar trophy head sat adorning the opposite wall, and the smell of bacon and eggs cooking wafted in through the door. The ceiling was warped with age and had exposed wooden beams, hinting of a bygone era. Where was I? Cottage? Is heaven a small country cottage? I wondered as I sat up in bed confused. More to the point, how long had I been out? "I won't be a minute, young'un. Just getting some breakfast sorted," came an old man's wiry voice from somewhere in the home. It's then that I looked over to a tall mirror sat in one corner of the room and recoiled when I saw myself. I was now a freak with a large scar of 4 claws running the length of my face and neck. I reached out to touch my throat and found no bandage or dressing, just more scar tissue. What the fuck? I once again attempted to say before the old man walked in and shuffled his way over to me with a cup of coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon and biscuits. I'd grown to love the biscuits and gravy over here in the USA since we'd first arrived and grabbed the Wendy's. But now I was absolutely ravenous and ditched the knife and fork he had laid out for me and dived in hungrily with my hands. "Mother of God, you are hungry." The old man laughed as I ate, like a dog, not caring for manners, etc. When I was done with the food, I guzzled down the pint of fresh orange juice and gasped out loud like a 5-year-old does after an afternoon of running around the backyard on a summer's day. "Thank you," I managed to say before belching forth a mighty burp that Shrek would be proud of. "Sorry." I apologized, feeling a little embarrassed, to say the least. "Don't you worry about that, son. Glad you fed up to eating. Name's Whiskey Joe, but you can call me Whiskey. Or Joe," he added, seemingly losing himself for a minute, deciding on his name. "Anywho, I bet you got lots of questions, and I'll be honest, I won't know the answer to most. But fire away, young'un. You're safe here for as long as you need," Whiskey said, patting my leg, and sitting back in his rickety chair, lighting a wooden pipe. How did I... The words lost in my jumbled mind, and Whiskey chimed in to the rescue. "Would it be easier if I just told you what I know, son?" he asked, looking concerned. I nodded, not knowing what to expect in the next 5 minutes. "Okay then, well, here goes," he added, raising an eyebrow and blowing a long plume of smoke into the rafters of the room. "Well, this land here is cursed, and it started almost over 200 years ago," he began before I interjected. "The Dudley family, right?" He nodded his head, running his fingers through his long grey beard, and continuing. "So, you know about the family, and I guess some of the curse that befall this tarnished land. But do you know about the 10 tests?" he asked, eyes almost glinting with anticipation. 10 tests? Like the government buildings and a research lab? I asked, and he shook his head. "Well, no, son. I mean, they is doing some funky mumbo-jumbo, hoodoo-voodoo type shit over there, but that's not what I mean. You see, long before the government moved into the neighborhood, folks talked of a werewolf, more accurately, a wolf demon, who was stronger, faster, and more cunning than any before. And through the dark power that was released on this land all those centuries ago, one man, half beast made his way into the forest in search of a portal or power source for this dark energy. You see, he was already cursed with lycanthropy, but was driven mad by the power and nothing could satiate his thirst. He had apparently traveled all the way down to New Orleans and visited some high priests or sorcerers in search of a higher power, something to take his wolfen form to a new darker depraved height. Whilst there, he was given a powerful ring, embezzled with dark magic of its own, and a scripture that apparently would open a thin veil between our world and that of the demons and ghouls, and all things tainted. He was told that there was a weakening between these worlds located deep within the dark entry forest, and that it had been sealed centuries before. That this power would make him an unstoppable force, and so he left that very night in search of this fabled land and the source of rebirth. A reawakening of evil never before seen in this world. And the priestess had warned the man that he might fall victim to the forest inhabitants before he even made it to the source, or even that the power itself would be too great for a simple werewolf to endure. But the man would not be swayed in his intentions and set course for the forest you now find yourself in, right now. Whiskey finished and sat back taking another pull on his pipe and looking me in the eyes with a look of worry and sadness. And then it dawned on me what he was about to tell me. "Well, your friends, God bless them, they're long gone, and for that I am very sorry. I wish you could have stopped what happened, but, you see, I'm just not as spry as I used to be. You, on the other hand, are just beginning your own journey, one that no man should ever have to experience. You, my dear boy, are a werewolf," Whiskey said sadly and without a smirk in sight. I was completely shocked, but at the same time, it all made sense. The attacks and strange animal kills, the spec-op guys and the attack on them. "Yep, you weren't supposed to make it. You're an anomaly in his world. I guess he's getting sloppy in his old age too and forgot to finish you off," Whiskey added whilst chuckling to himself, causing a hacking, smoker's cough which took him a minute to recover from. "What?" I asked, dumbfounded. "He never leaves anyone alive. Never. My guess is he must have been stoned out of his mind on those tranquilizer darts that they gave him, and forgot to finish his dinner." "Oh shit. I exclaimed. Yeah, oh shit, he retorted with another chuckle. Anyway, like I said, you can stay here for as long as you need, but I'm going to have to lock you up on your first transformation. First time it's always tough. Most fall to the curse's more sadistic nature, hence why there's no nice werewolves. But when you're as old as I am, you get to hear a few stories, or every now and then I would hear of a great man who tamed his curse's beast. Became a legend on the Appalachian Trail for rescuing folks from skinwalkers and the eyed-hungry face eater. He died trying to save a family in an RV attack down in Kentucky. I think you can guess who was attacking the family, and eventually killed the good guy. To me, he's dirt, and the sooner he's dead, the better, young'un. I call him Janko because he smells like a janky old creek. But he doesn't pester me too much because I have my own ways of protection. I learned some nasty booby trap ideas in Nam, and this whole area, I's rigged to fuck up his day if he gets too close. So, how long do I have until I transform? I asked, completely bewildered and sick with anxiety. The word transformation would seem so alien to me. Oh, I'd say give or take 2 or 3 nights. But that's not the hard part, son. The whiskey sat forward in his chair and looked me deep in the eyes. You see, Janko ain't your everyday werewolf, as I explained already. He went in search of this evil power source, and unfortunately, nothing could or would stand in his way. He was successful, and since that fateful night, has travelled the country slaying as he pleases. Now sure, the government caught up with him many times and even captured him for a number of years. It seems to me that they're trying to harness his power and reproduce the... I cut whiskey off before he could finish. And make super soldiers from the curse. I said plainly, without missing a beat. Whiskey eyed me for a second, and I explained what the guys in the truck were talking about before the attack. Well, damn, young'un. I knew it was more than rumours. Looks like he escaped again, and well, you're the outcome. Aye, good work, government. Whiskey exclaimed aloud, slapping his hand against his knee once more. What you now face is either death or... He paused. Or an opportunity to revenge and do some good in this world, or... He trailed off, lost in thought. I said nothing, waiting with bated breath for him to finish his sentence. Or you die a terrible pain-filled death by the hands of another. He finished. Nice. I chuckled, trying to find some silver lining. You, my dear boy, you faced the 10 tests of the wolf. Once you leave here, I cannot protect you. Your very being will become a beacon of sorts to all werewolves around the world and some other nasty cryptids too. You see, Janko's power, it's like nothing else that walks this plane of existence. Others will sense this power and come for you and try to slay you in order to gain that same power. Like I said before, you are a mistake. He never would have shared his curse's power, and up until you, nobody else lived long enough to hear of it. Each time you are tested, Whiskey said this with his 2 fingers emphasizing the point of tested. If you win and kill whoever or whatever has come to try their hand at gaining this immense power, you will be gifted a new skill or power, such as dexterity or cunning, possibly even mind speak. Fail, and you die, leaving this essence to your assassin. Now the process is already begun by the looks of your injuries healing. And that. Whiskey added while pointing to my chest. I lifted the cotton PJ top I was wearing to see a dark purple and blue vein running its way up my torso and through the deep scars I had that joined with my neck. Yep, gross, ain't it? Thankfully, I didn't get one of those when I became a lycanthrope. As I said, you are safe here and I will teach you all that I know until you are ready. He said as he clasped his bony fingers together, and it's then that I noticed his fingernails were thick, sharp and black. His eyes also shimmered a slight yellow hue. Let's get you dressed and show you the safety cell. You'll have to stay in there until the first transformation is complete. Then we will know what we, or rather you, are dealing with. I will attempt to communicate with you and help you through the process. But I warn you, young'un, very few of us make it out alive. let alone with a good side still in control. If the transformation doesn't kill you, and you manage to retain your heart, you will be like nothing that walks this earth. Even Janko failed to his first test. He is merely a husk of a man that once lived, like autopilot mode with an ancient demonic spirit in control. I doubt he was much of a good man before the descent into madness, before he became so salty about life in general. And who knows, maybe he even visited his mother regularly. But what remains is something so twisted and hell-bent on violence and carnage that you can hardly consider him ever stopping. Whiskey said, with a disdainful shake of his head. Why? I asked, not knowing why I did, but I needed to know something before truly trusting this man. Why what, young'un? He asked. Why did you help me? I mean no disrespect, and I can see you're a decent man with true heart, but why help me? Why risk all you have to save me? I asked, honestly baffled. Because I've been where you are. I felt that fear creeping slowly as the days ticked by, closer and closer to the first transformation. I was alone, hiding way out in a canyon, in a cave. After my friends and I were attacked, I awoke saturated in my own blood. My arms were broken before I had passed out, and then when I awoke, they were mysteriously repaired. And as I looked around at my friends' scattered remains, it all came flooding back to me. The howl, the screams, those yellow eyes. I suddenly realized that something was very, very wrong with my survival. It was dark already, and I could see perfectly well, as if it were daytime. A strange silver shimmer caught the edges of the surrounding canyon walls and everything that I gazed upon with my new eyes. But that was just the beginning. My journey into lycanthropy was harsh, lonely, and almost suicidal. I had heard the rumors around the Mexico border and up in the Smoky Mountains. My grandpappy was a traveled man, and he would tell us nippers all sorts of crazy stories. And that's when the penny dropped, and I realized I was never going to be the same again. I was a werewolf. Whiskey trailed off, looking out the small window as a tiny bird sat, eating some wild berries. I see. I myself trailed off, trying to digest everything that was happening. There is one other reason, young'un, he added with a woeful expression on his face. His thick, bushy grey eyebrows sunk low, and a scowl overtook his kind eyes. You see, Janko took someone from me many years ago. It was here that I found love. Here that we decided to live out our days together, living off the land and all of its abundance. And well, that's how we lived together, my dear Clarissa and I. Two wolves in love, rough tumbling down in the falls and chasing deer in the forest, exploring the deep caves. We had 25 beautiful years here together, with not a disturbance or nothing. Hell, folks are so spooked by this place and its history that there's hardly any foot traffic, and that makes for a good conscience. After all, we are fucking werewolves. Ha ha ha. He suddenly burst with laughter, breaking the heavy atmosphere before resuming his serious point. Then one night, as we were laughing and joking around the table, his howl crashed through the still night air like a freight train whistling. It was so loud, and immediately we both knew something was wrong. I don't know, but it was like our lichen sense could pick up his dark and fetid energy. Our wolf spirits knew that this was no ordinary werewolf. This was a new evil come home to the place it had resided for centuries. And we were on its turf and the menu. Whiskey started to once again pack his wooden pipe before lighting it and taking a long drag and blowing another grey plume up into the rafters. His eyes met mine, and I could see the pain and anger boiling behind the yellow eyes. The yellow was much more vivid now that he was recounting such a painful story. I could see that it had stirred up dark and sadistic emotions within his kind heart. This old boy, given the opportunity to have revenge, would not miss in a heartbeat in trying his best to annihilate this Janko once and for all. Consequences be damned. He then continued. Within minutes all the deer and animals came running out of the forest and around the house, and there, chasing hot on the hills, was Janko. Black as the night itself, but his gaze was not on the animals. No. His eyes met mine as I swung the front door closed and braced for impact. Crash! The door exploded on impact and I was sent flying, headfirst, into the opposite wall. With my head cracked open, my vision swam in and out of consciousness, the edges darkening a little. Whiskey closed his eyes as tears began to roll off his cheeks into his lap. Then he launched himself at Clarissa, and with one swift swipe, ripped her head clean off her shoulders. Her lifeless eyes met mine as her head rolled towards my feet, and I was filled with a furious rage and got up to meet his baneful gaze.
"Come on, you dog,"
he screamed at me, and I ran at him, our claws slicing and digging into each other. He managed to overpower me pretty quickly, then lunged towards my throat for a killing blow, when suddenly a loud crack rang out from outside, and the old Sasquatches had gone to investigate the intrusion of our peace. You see, we had a special relationship with the Squatches. We always respected their territory and even spent time with each other fishing and hunting. Janko growled a deep baritone growl that rumbled my chest as he stood up and dropped my half-mangled body to the wooden floor. Outside were 4 Sasquatches, and it was all the big guys, the Alpha and his sons, or they'd come to our help. And they were no easy fight, especially when there was 4 of them. And Janko looked at me and scowled before running out to meet the Alpha head-on. Oh, there was a battle that was like nothing I'd ever witnessed and went on and on for a number of minutes. And finally, the Alpha's sons had had enough, and they too tore into Janko, throwing him into trees and smashing his maw to bits. And seeing the battlefield turn on him, he did what any sniveling shit does, and bailed, running westward towards the caves and out of sight. The sons, well, they tried to pursue him, but were caught off by the Alpha, as he knew the deed was done. And soon I was carried out of my home, and Clarissa's body was carefully carried as well. They wrapped her in elk hides, and slowly we were taken to their den. That night we sat around a huge fire as they healed me with some kind of medicine. It was green and gloopy and smelled like ass, but it soothed my cuts. Eventually, as they lifted Clarissa off the ground and placed her onto a wooden raft, I was helped by Genghis, the Alpha, over to her resting body. He handed me a torch and nodded, leaving me to light her body aflame and send her to the afterlife. And as tears fell from my eyes, young'un, I pushed her raft free of the bank and onto her final journey. Tears streamed down my face and a large hand fell upon my shoulder. I looked to see Genghis looking down at me and nodding. He'll pay for this, my love. I'll see to that, I muttered as we watched her floating further and further down the river. Whiskey finally said as he sniffed back sorrow and pain that no man should have to bear. God, that's awful, Whiskey, I added with tears in my own eyes. Yeah, it sure was, young'un. But I have a feeling you are the one to put a stop to this evil little critter. You have his curse, and if you can survive the 9 more tests, I know you'll do what's right. I feel it in my bones, lad. His time on this green earth, it's over. So, let's get you fixed up and through the first transformation. Then I have a few friends that want us to visit before we have our showdown. It's time to fight, son. Time to get justice for your friends and my wife. So what do you say? He asked with a sly smirk on his mouth, a toothy canine just peeking out from under his top lip. We clasped hands shaking on it and got to work with preparations for Project Payback. Oh boy, it's gonna be a long couple of nights. And now it's time for you guys to decide what happens in the next episode. Listener choices are as follows. 1. After my first transformation, Whiskey and I head towards Salem in search of an old witch that Whiskey used to knock boots with. She would grant me access to old spellbooks and possibly a new power of magic to combine with everything. 2. After my first transformation, Whiskey and I head to the Sasquatch's den and meet with them, forming a plan to be ready when I have passed the last test. 3. Hit the road on my own, taking great care of my surroundings and preparing for the next attempt on my life. Another werewolf will come for me. It's up to us to decide where. Or 4. Something else that you would like to see happen. Can be anything at all, as long as it follows the original path of revenge and dealing with the beacon effect of this curse. The choice is yours. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. Hope you guys enjoyed that one as much as I. I really do enjoy writing so much and hearing your response. And I know the last time we did this listener choice sort of thingamajiggy, it seemed to work really well, and I know you guys really enjoyed it and felt a lot more engaged. Of course, as ever though, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. Now if you think you can pen the next big hit, or would just like to get in touch with me, then please do so at the contact email, which is as on screen. contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. I hope everyone's well and happy this week and are getting stuck into work or studying, or perhaps you're a long distance driver. Whatever it is that you do, I hope you're enjoying it and are giving it your all. But above all guys, remember, be safe, not sorry. He had apparently travelled all the way down to New Orleans and visited... He had apparently travelled all the way down to New Orleans. He had apparently travelled all the way down to New Orleans and visited some high priests or sorcerers in search of a higher power.
What happens, you decide. Listener choices are as follows.
What I am trying to get across is that under the very fabric of society, as you know it, lies an unwelcome and perilous world, run by big business and crooked government officials. Well, I guess the last horror you already know. Yeah boy, jokes for days. As the trees and the tree, myself and Gary both still holding an oh shit handle above our heads and breathing a little rattled. Its large white eyeballs pop from their sockets, hanging loosely and dripping blood and other bodily fluids. Fuck you, crackhead! One for the bloopers. Well, look who got scared out of the big bad woods. Wes bust up laughing so hard he nearly fell from his seat on the down. Well, look who got scared out of the big bad. Please, bro, just sit down and stay alert. We're in for Please tell me I pressed record. Yes, I did. I can't be bothered to do the rest. When I first started at the I awoke to the bouncing and rocking sensation. Sensation, taking me higher, sensation.